Harry S. Truman was a Missouri farmer who became the 33rd President of the United States and one of the most consequential yet underestimated leaders in American history. Harry S. Truman, Democratic politician, haberdasher, and plain-spoken reformer, was born in Lamar, Missouri on May 8, 1884. He came from modest circumstances in rural America. He had an unassuming presence with his direct manner and straightforward speaking style. Truman's early years were marked by hard work and practical education. He attended public schools in Independence, Missouri, but never went to college, making him the last president without a college degree. His education was self-directed through voracious reading, particularly history and biography, though his later career would test his knowledge in ways he could never have imagined. After finishing high school in 1901, Truman worked various jobs including timekeeper for a railroad construction company and clerk at Kansas City banks. However, financial difficulties forced him to return to the family farm in Grandview, Missouri in 1906. He spent the next decade as a farmer, working the 600-acre farm alongside his father and brother. During this time, Truman was developing his character through hard physical labor and practical problem-solving. He joined various fraternal organizations including the Freemasons, which would provide important social and political connections throughout his life. His natural ability to work with people and earn their trust quickly set him apart from other young farmers and businessmen. In 1917, when America entered World War I, Truman was 33 years old and could have avoided service, but he joined the Missouri National Guard. He was sent to France as a captain in the artillery. Truman commanded Battery D of the 129th Field Artillery Regiment, a unit with a reputation for indiscipline. Through firm leadership and genuine concern for his men, Truman transformed the battery into an effective fighting unit. He saw action in several major battles, including the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. His men respected him, and the experience gave Truman confidence in his leadership abilities. The war years were formative, teaching him about command, responsibility, and the weight of decisions that affected lives. He returned from France in 1919 as a major, having proven himself under the most demanding circumstances. Shortly after returning from the war on June 28, 1919, Truman married Elizabeth Virginia Wallace, known as Bess, whom he had known since childhood. Bess was his high school sweetheart, and Truman had courted her for years before she finally agreed to marry him. Bess was a reserved and private woman who preferred to stay out of the public eye. She became his closest advisor and confidant, though she rarely spoke publicly. Their marriage was a genuine partnership built on decades of friendship and mutual respect. They would have one child, a daughter named Margaret, born in 1924. The family remained close throughout Truman's political career, with Bess providing stability and honest counsel. After the war, Truman and an army friend opened a haberdashery in Kansas City. Truman and Jack Hobson's store sold men's furnishings and initially did good business with returning veterans. However, the recession of 1921 devastated the business, and it failed in 1922, leaving Truman deeply in debt. He refused to declare bankruptcy and spent years paying off his creditors, a matter of personal honor. The failure was humiliating, but it taught Truman about economic hardship and the struggles of small businessmen. It also convinced him that his future lay in politics rather than business. In 1922, Truman entered politics with the support of Tom Pendergast, the powerful boss of the Kansas City Democratic machine. Pendergast's organization was notoriously corrupt, but Truman maintained his personal integrity while benefiting from machine support. Truman was elected judge of the county court of Jackson County, an administrative rather than judicial position. He lost re-election in 1924 but came back to win election as presiding judge in 1926. He served in this position until 1934, building a reputation as an honest and efficient administrator. He oversaw a major road-building program and reformed county government, always ensuring that contracts were awarded fairly and work was done properly. Even Pendergast's enemies acknowledged that Truman was honest, unusual for a politician connected to a corrupt machine. In 1934, Pendergast selected Truman to run for the United States Senate. Truman was not the first choice. Several more prominent politicians had declined. He was seen as a compromise candidate, loyal to the machine but acceptable to reformers because of his clean record. Truman won the Democratic primary and the general election, going to Washington as a freshman senator at age 50. His early years in the Senate were difficult. Other senators dismissed him as the senator from Pendergast, assuming he was merely a tool of the Kansas City machine. Truman worked quietly, studying issues and building relationships. He supported New Deal legislation and focused on transportation and infrastructure issues. Truman's Senate career nearly ended in 1940. The Pendergast machine had collapsed after Tom Pendergast was convicted of tax evasion and sent to prison. Without machine support and facing a strong primary challenge, Truman's re-election seemed unlikely. He campaigned across Missouri, traveling thousands of miles and speaking at every town and crossroads. His message emphasized his Senate record and his independence from the disgraced Pendergast organization. He won the primary by a narrow margin and easily won the general election. The victory proved that Truman could win on his own merits, not just as a machine candidate. During his second term, Truman achieved national prominence through his chairmanship of the Senate Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program, known as the Truman Committee. Established in 1941 as America prepared for possible war, the committee investigated waste, fraud, and inefficiency in defense spending. Truman traveled throughout the country, visiting defense plants and military bases, questioning contractors and military officers. The committee's work saved billions of dollars and prevented numerous scandals. Truman's fair and thorough investigations earned him respect across party lines. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine and became known as one of the most effective senators in Washington. The committee's success transformed Truman from an obscure senator into a national figure. In 1944, President Franklin Roosevelt was running for an unprecedented fourth term. His health was failing, though this was not widely known. The question of who would be vice president was therefore crucial, as that person might well become president. The incumbent vice president, Henry Wallace, was controversial and opposed by party conservatives. Roosevelt and party leaders needed a compromise candidate who could unite the party. After much maneuvering at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, Truman was selected as Roosevelt's running mate. Truman had not sought the nomination and was reluctant to accept it, but party leaders convinced him it was his duty. The Roosevelt-Truman ticket won easily in November 1944. Truman served as vice president for only 82 days. Roosevelt kept him at a distance and informed him of little. Truman was not told about the Manhattan Project to develop an atomic bomb. He was not briefed on war strategy or post-war planning. He presided over the Senate and attended cabinet meetings but had no real role in governing. On April 12, 1945, Truman was summoned to the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt told him that President Roosevelt had died. Truman asked if there was anything he could do for her. She replied, "Is there anything we can do for you? For you are the one in trouble now." Truman was sworn in as president that evening. He told reporters, "I felt like the moon, the stars, and all the planets had fallen on me." Truman became president at one of the most critical moments in American history. World War II was reaching its climax in Europe and continuing in the Pacific. The alliance with the Soviet Union was beginning to fracture. The post-war world order remained to be determined. Truman had to learn on the job, relying on Roosevelt's advisors while developing his own approach to leadership. His first months in office were overwhelming. He was briefed on the atomic bomb project and had to decide whether to use the weapon against Japan. He attended the Potsdam Conference with Churchill and Stalin, negotiating the shape of post-war Europe. He oversaw the final defeat of Germany in the continuing war against Japan. The decision to use atomic bombs against Japan was the most momentous of Truman's presidency. In late July 1945, Truman learned that the atomic bomb had been successfully tested in New Mexico. He faced a terrible choice. An invasion of Japan would cost hundreds of thousands of American casualties and possibly millions of Japanese deaths. The atomic bomb offered a way to end the war quickly, but would kill many thousands of civilians. Truman's military advisors recommended using the bomb. After careful consideration, Truman authorized atomic attacks on Japanese cities if Japan did not surrender. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb destroyed Hiroshima. 3 days later, another bomb devastated Nagasaki. Japan surrendered on August 15th. Truman never publicly expressed doubt about his decision, though the moral weight of ordering the deaths of over 100,000 people must have been enormous. He believed he had saved lives by ending the war quickly, but critics then and later questioned whether the bombings were necessary. With the war over, Truman faced the challenges of peacetime. Reconverting the economy from war production to civilian production caused inflation and labor unrest. Millions of veterans returned home needing jobs and housing. Truman proposed an ambitious domestic program called the Fair Deal, including national health insurance, federal aid to education, civil rights legislation, and expansion of Social Security. However, a conservative coalition of Republicans and Southern Democrats in Congress blocked most of his proposals. Truman's approval ratings plummeted as the country struggled with post-war adjustment. By 1946, his presidency seemed to be failing. The 1946 midterm elections were a disaster for Democrats. Republicans won control of both houses of Congress for the first time since 1928. The new Republican Congress passed the Taft-Hartley Act over Truman's veto, restricting Union power. They blocked Truman's domestic proposals and investigated alleged communist infiltration of the government. Truman seemed likely to lose the 1948 presidential election. Indeed, many Democrats wanted to replace him as the party's nominee. However, Truman was determined to run and win on his own merits, not as Roosevelt's successor. The 1948 campaign was one of the greatest upsets in American political history. The Democratic Party split 3 ways. Southern Democrats, opposed to Truman's civil rights positions, formed the state's Rights Democratic Party and nominated Strom Thurmond. Left-wing Democrats, believing Truman was too hostile to the Soviet Union, formed the Progressive Party and nominated Henry Wallace. The Republican nominee, Thomas Dewey, was heavily favored to win. Polls showed Truman losing badly. Political experts predicted a Dewey landslide. Truman refused to accept defeat. He embarked on a whistle-stop campaign, traveling over 30,000 miles by train and delivering hundreds of speeches. He attacked the do-nothing Republican Congress and promised to fight for ordinary Americans. His plain-speaking and fighting spirit contrasted with Dewey's stiff formality. Truman drew large, enthusiastic crowds who shouted, "Give 'em hell, Harry." On Election Day, Truman defeated Dewey in one of the greatest upsets in American history. He won 303 electoral votes to Dewey's 189. The Chicago Tribune, so confident of Dewey's victory that it had printed early editions declaring Dewey defeats Truman, became a symbol of the upset. Truman's victory was personal and hard-earned. He had won without Roosevelt's coattails, without party unity, and without the support of political experts. The victory vindicated his leadership and gave him a mandate to govern. Truman's second term focused increasingly on foreign policy. The Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union dominated international affairs. Truman's foreign policy doctrine, announced in 1947, committed America to containing Soviet expansion. The Truman Doctrine provided aid to Greece and Turkey to prevent communist takeovers. The Marshall Plan provided billions of dollars to rebuild Western Europe, creating prosperity and strengthening democratic governments. When the Soviet Union blockaded West Berlin in 1948, Truman ordered an airlift that supplied the city for nearly a year until the Soviets backed down. In 1949, Truman oversaw the creation of NATO, a military alliance of Western democracies. Cold War turned hot in June 1950 when communist North Korea invaded South Korea. Truman immediately decided to defend South Korea, obtaining United Nations support for military intervention. He sent American troops under General Douglas MacArthur to Korea. Initially, the war went badly, with North Korean forces nearly conquering the entire peninsula. Then MacArthur's brilliant landing at Incheon turned the tide. UN forces drove north, nearly reaching the Chinese border. In November 1950, Communist China entered the war, sending hundreds of thousands of troops across the border. The war became a stalemate around the 38th parallel where it had begun. Truman's handling of the Korean War became controversial. General MacArthur, a genuine war hero and popular figure, disagreed with Truman's strategy of limited war. MacArthur wanted to attack China directly, possibly using nuclear weapons. Truman believed this would trigger World War III. When MacArthur publicly criticized Truman's policies and appealed to Congress over the president's head, Truman fired him in April 1951. The decision was enormously unpopular. MacArthur returned to a hero's welcome and addressed Congress to thunderous applause. However, Truman stood firm on the principle of civilian control of the military. History has vindicated Truman's decision. MacArthur's strategy risked a wider war that could have been catastrophic. The Korean War dragged on through 1951 and 1952 with neither side able to achieve victory. Truce talks began but made little progress. American casualties mounted. Truman's approval ratings sank to record lows. The war became deeply unpopular. Accusations of corruption in the administration and fears about communist infiltration of the government further damaged Truman's presidency. By 1952, Truman was politically exhausted. He announced he would not seek re-election, though he was constitutionally eligible for another term. The Democratic nominee, Adlai Stevenson, lost badly to Republican Dwight Eisenhower, the former general who promised to end the Korean War. Truman left office in January 1953 with low approval ratings and little public appreciation. He returned to Independence, Missouri, where he lived modestly on his Army pension. Former presidents received no pension at that time, and Truman refused to use his former office for commercial gain. He wrote his memoirs and oversaw the construction of his presidential library in Independence. He took daily walks around Independence, greeting neighbors and visitors. He corresponded with citizens and commented occasionally on political issues. Gradually, historians and the public began to reassess his presidency more favorably. Truman's final years saw a remarkable rehabilitation of his reputation. Historians praised his decisive leadership during critical times. His desegregation of the armed forces and support for civil rights were recognized as courageous. His foreign policy achievements, particularly the Marshall Plan and NATO, were credited with winning the Cold War. His integrity and plain speaking were appreciated in contrast to later political scandals. By the 1960s and 1970s, Truman was widely admired as a great president who had risen to extraordinary challenges. Bess Truman remained at her husband's side throughout his retirement. She had never enjoyed public life and was relieved to return to their home in Independence. Their marriage remained strong, built on decades of companionship and mutual respect. Margaret Truman became a singer and later an author, writing mysteries and biographies. The family remained close, with Truman delighting in his grandchildren. Truman's health declined in his final years. He suffered from various ailments but remained mentally sharp. On December 5, 1972, he was admitted to a hospital in Kansas City with lung congestion and heart irregularities. His condition deteriorated over the following weeks. He died on December 26, 1972, at age 88. His funeral was held in Independence, and he was buried at the Truman Library. President Richard Nixon and former President Lyndon Johnson attended, along with thousands of ordinary citizens who had come to respect the plain-speaking man from Missouri. Truman's legacy is substantial and enduring. He made decisions of enormous consequence with courage and decisiveness. He authorized the use of atomic weapons, committed America to containing communism, fired a popular general, and desegregated the armed forces. He was a common man who proved that ordinary Americans could rise to extraordinary leadership. He had no college degree, no inherited wealth, no aristocratic connections. He succeeded through hard work, integrity, and sound judgment. Modern historians consistently rank Truman among the greatest American presidents. His foreign policy achievements shaped the post-war world. The Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan, and NATO created the framework for American leadership that eventually won the Cold War. His decision to defend South Korea, though costly and unpopular, prevented communist expansion and demonstrated American resolve. His firing of MacArthur affirmed civilian control of the military, a fundamental constitutional principle. Truman's domestic achievements, though less dramatic, were also significant. He desegregated the armed forces by executive order, a major step toward racial equality. He proposed civil rights legislation that, though blocked by Congress, laid the groundwork for later reforms. He expanded Social Security and raised the minimum wage. He appointed the first Commission on Civil Rights and spoke forcefully against racial discrimination, courageous positions for a president from a border state. Perhaps Truman's greatest legacy is his example of leadership. He showed that a president need not be eloquent or charismatic to be effective. He demonstrated that integrity and decisiveness matter more than polish and pedigree. He proved that ordinary citizens can rise to meet extraordinary challenges. His famous sign on his desk read, "The buck stops here," expressing his belief that a president must take responsibility for decisions. He never blamed others for failures or sought to evade accountability. Truman also left a more problematic legacy. His loyalty to political cronies sometimes led him to defend the indefensible. His administration was touched by corruption scandals, though Truman himself was never implicated. His domestic surveillance programs and loyalty oaths contributed to the Red Scare atmosphere of the early Cold War. His decision to use atomic weapons, while defensible in context, opened the nuclear age with its ongoing dangers. His handling of the Korean War while preventing wider conflict left the peninsula divided and the war unresolved. Yet even with these qualifications, Truman stands as a consequential and admirable president. He faced challenges as daunting as any president has confronted. He made difficult decisions with limited information and enormous pressure. He remained true to his principles while adapting to circumstances. He was neither a visionary like Roosevelt nor a great communicator like Kennedy, but he was a solid, decent, capable leader when America needed exactly that. The most fitting assessment of Harry S. Truman is that he was an ordinary man who achieved greatness through character and circumstance. He had no extraordinary talents as a speaker or politician. He championed important causes but was often thwarted by Congress. He was plain-spoken, sometimes crude, and never comfortable with the trappings of power. Yet he made decisions that shaped the modern world. He committed America to global leadership. He stood firm against totalitarianism. He defended constitutional principles even when unpopular. He served his country faithfully and left office with his integrity intact. Truman represents a particular type of American leader, the common man elevated by crisis who proves equal to the challenge through character rather than brilliance. History is full of such figures, people who rise from obscurity to meet extraordinary demands. Truman's triumph was not that he possessed exceptional abilities, but that his ordinary virtues of honesty, courage, and decisiveness proved sufficient for exceptional times. In the end, Harry S. Truman was neither a prophet nor a failure, but rather a capable leader and decent man who met history's demands. His legacy includes both foreign policy achievements that shaped the post-war world and domestic initiatives that advanced social justice. He is remembered today for the decision to use atomic weapons, the Marshall Plan, the firing of MacArthur, and the upset victory of 1948. This seems fitting for a man who served his country faithfully during transformative times and proved that American democracy could produce leaders equal to any challenge, even from the most modest beginnings.